It's one of the most high-profile murder cases in Houston.
It truly is the kind of story you could not invent.
It's unbelievable. I mean, how can a human being do what she did to my son?
On the night of January 13th, 2003, a cold Monday night enveloped Houston, Texas. Wrapped in a silk white robe, Suzanne loomed over her restrained husband. Gripping a knife in her hand, the metallic blade reflected the cold resolve that had consumed her. The bindings on his hands and legs rendered him helpless. There was nothing he could do. In Suzanne's twisted mind, this was the only way she and her children could escape the abuse of her husband. As she stared at the knife, Suzanne knew tonight was the night the abuse would finally end. Before I begin the video, I do want to say that this is my first video, so I want to go over what I will be doing on this channel. On this channel, I'm going to be going over true crime stories, unsolved crime stories, missing 411, scary stories, just anything that's really morbid and a little dark that I find interesting. So if you find any of those interesting, I would love for you to follow me while I go through these stories and cases. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the video and thank you for watching. Suzanne Lucille Wright was born on April 24th, 1976 in Houston, Texas, to her mother Sue and her father Jimmy White. Not much is known about Suzanne's childhood, but after high school she worked as a topless dancer at the age of 17, which I don't know how that was allowed, but she worked as a topless dancer for around 2 months before she quit. After she quit, she used the money she had saved up to enroll in a nursing program, but said it was too time consuming, so she quit not long after joining. After that, she just went around different jobs until she found a job as a waiter. Suzanne was known to be a really kind person. Her co-workers loved her. She was a good family person, and she was a good person all around. Before Jeff met Susan, he spent most of his time partying, drinking, and doing drugs with his friends. But when he turned 30, he knew he wanted to start a family of his own. At the age of 21, Suzanne met Jeff while she was working, and Jeff, being the charming man he was, Jeff asked her out on a date. Suzanne accepted, and they would go on a date not long after. Now, after the first date, it was said that they had found each other's other half, and that they really hit it off well. From the outside, their relationship looked very well. Suzanne's co-workers and friends said that they were an amazing couple. They did everything together, and they just seemed like a really strong couple. After dating for around a year, Suzanne got pregnant with her first child, Bradley, and they got married not long after that. They then bought a house and had a daughter named Kaylee. Now, Jeff made a lot of money, and he made enough money so that Suzanne didn't have to work, and so instead she would stay home and tend to the house and the kids. Everything was looking up for Suzanne and Jeff, and they really did look like a happy family. But you never truly know what's going on behind closed doors. Now, I mentioned that Jeff would do drugs while he was a teen and a young adult, but that never really stopped. In fact, it got worse. Behind the scenes, Jeff was a frequent drug user that would get abusive. Jeff would punch, kick, and slap Susan while on substances. After suffering his abuse for years, Suzanne would finally break one Monday evening. Now, it's pretty obvious to say that we will never know what happened in the Wrights' home that fateful night. But what we do know for sure is that that night, Suzanne tied Jeff to their bed and proceeded to stab him 193 times with 2 different knives. After the murder of Jeff, Suzanne buried him in their backyard, where Jeff had made a hole earlier where he wanted to put a fountain. Now, I will talk about her telling of the events once we get into the trial. 5 days later, she called her attorney and confessed to the murder and burying him in their backyard. The attorney, shocked of course, then informed the Harris County District Attorney about the body and the confession. Suzanne then turned herself in on January 24, 2004, and was arrested. And the trial would begin on February 24, 2004, a month after she turned herself in.
Susan Wright was a young wife and mother convicted of stabbing her husband nearly 200 times in their bed. The nation followed every step of the sensational trial.
Susan Wright kills her husband, and the narrative plays out in dramatic fashion during her trial inside a Houston courtroom.
The trial was very over the top and dramatic. To some, it seemed like it was straight out of a TV show, just because of how theatrical it was. The case garnered national attention, and people were tuning in from all over the country to see what happened and what will happen to Suzanne Wright. I'm going to start off with Suzanne Wright's telling of the events. According to Suzanne, on the Monday evening of January 13th, Jeff came home from a boxing lesson high on cocaine. Jeff then approached Bradley and tried to play box with him. Jeff hit Bradley pretty hard in the face and he started crying. After that, Jeff ordered Suzanne to the bedroom where he proceeded to her. She then said that once he was finished, he left to the kitchen and came back with a butcher's knife and threatened to kill her. Suzanne said they went into a physical struggle where she kicked him in the knee and his grip on the knife loosened. She was able to take the knife from him and stabbed him repeatedly. Suzanne said she thought that if she stopped, he would fight back and kill her. At that point, their kid Bradley knocked on the door. Believing that Jeff would kill her if she stopped, she tied him to the bed before taking Bradley to his bed. Now, I do gotta mention that at the time of the murder, Bradley was 4 years old and Kaylee was 18 months old. Thinking Jeff was still alive and had found the first knife, she grabbed the second knife and proceeded to stab him again and again. While on trial, Suzanne pleaded not guilty for reason of self-defense, though Kelly Siegler, the prosecutor, proposed a different story. According to prosecutor Kelly Siegler, the events of that Monday night in Harris County went like this. Jeff was laying back on the couch watching TV when he suddenly notices Suzanne standing in the front of their bedroom with a silk white robe on. Without any words being said, he knew what was going on. He turned off the TV, got off the couch, and went to their bedroom. Suzanne then seduced him and tied him up. After this, she proceeded to stab Jeff 193 times. Kelly Siegler says the motive for Suzanne to murder Jeff was his $200,000 life insurance policy. Assistant District Attorney John Jordan said that Suzanne Wright, and I quote, was not a battered woman. This was a divorce by homicide. In an attempt to get their point across, they brought in the actual bed that Jeff had been murdered on and proceeded to reenact the gruesome murder. And I'll play a clip of that.
The state says this is Jeffrey Wright's deathbed with bloodstained mattress and the ties that bound him. An assistant DA played the role of the 34-year-old victim. Prosecutor Kelly Siegler reenacted the 2003 attack.
Move your hands up like you're trying to get me. That's all you can move?
Now, this was the main reason why I picked this case. The reenactment was just so over the top, and I'm not quite sure how it was allowed. On March 3rd, 2004, 9 days after the trial began, Suzanne Wright was sentenced to 25 years in prison for the murder of Jeff Wright.
Assessor punishment at confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 25 years.
Susan Wright stands looking stunned. The prosecution team urged the jury to sentence Wright to prison for at least 45 years, but they still considered this sentence just.
But what they were going to do to punish her, you know, she looks the way she looks. Murder defendants don't look like her. What would a jury do when they heard about all that abuse and they couldn't know one way or the other? We never knew. I told the Wright family that, so I would say we're not surprised. We're pleased with the verdict.
5 years later, Suzanne's team was able to reduce her 25-year sentence to 20. Suzanne was also denied parole twice, but got it on the third attempt. Suzanne was released on December 20th, 2020 after serving 16 of the 20 years in the Gatesville Women's Facility, and she is now on parole.
Now fast forward to today, and Susan Wright has been released from prison. Channel 2's Brandon Walker is live in Tomball tonight. And Brandon, she was released from the Gatesville prison north of Fort Hood this morning, and then she made her way to Tomball, where you are. Did she say anything as she entered that new home?
As she did, Chris, it was a very brief conversation, very briefly. Simply put, Mrs. Wright wants privacy for herself and her family.
Please don't do this to my family. Please stop. Have a heart, please.
Certainly. Is there anything that y'all would want to say?
No, ma'am. I would just like privacy. Please respect that.
Now, I'm sure you're wondering what ended up happening with Suzanne's children. Well, Suzanne's children were adopted by Jeff's brother and his wife, and have had no contact with Suzanne since the adoption. As of the time of recording this, Bradley is 24 years old and Kaylee is 20 years old. Now, I couldn't find any more information on what Suzanne is doing now, and I didn't want to dig any deeper for her privacy. So that is all I have about the case. Now, I do have a fun fact, which is that a movie was made after the case called The Blue Eye Butcher, which got a 53% audience score in Rotten Tomatoes. So I won't be planning on watching it anytime soon. That's going to be it for the video. I really appreciate you listening to me talk about the case and watching my first video. If you do like content like this, I do plan on making a video once a week. So if you're interested in what I'm going to be doing, I would appreciate you if you stick by. But besides that, I really appreciate you once again, and I hope you have a good day.